The expensive clothing store was filled with well-dressed customers browsing through designer jackets and shoes. The salesman, wearing a crisp black suit, stood behind the counter, scanning the crowd. That's when a man in old, worn-out clothes stepped inside. His jacket was tattered, his shoes covered in dust. He walked hesitantly toward a rack of suits, running his fingers over the fabric. The salesman's nose wrinkled in disgust. "Excuse me," the man said softly, "how much is this suit?" The salesman snorted. "More than you can afford," he replied coldly. The man's face fell, but he tried again. "I just want to check the price." The salesman stepped forward, blocking his path. "I don't think this store is for you," he sneered. Customers nearby chuckled. Some whispered. The poor man's ears turned red. Just then, a slow, measured voice broke the silence. "That's funny," it said. "I was just about to say the same thing about you." The salesman froze. The customers turned. And standing near the entrance, hands in his pockets, was Clint Eastwood. His gaze locked onto the salesman, and in that moment, the entire store went silent. The salesman forced a smile. "Sir, I was just..." Clint took a slow step forward. "Just what?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Judging a man by his clothes?" The salesman swallowed hard. He glanced around, but no one came to his defense. Clint turned to the poor man and gestured toward the suits. "Go ahead. Take your time." The man hesitated, then nodded. He walked to the rack, his hands trembling slightly. The salesman crossed his arms. "Look, Mr. Eastwood, I'm just doing my job. We have a reputation to maintain." Clint raised an eyebrow. "Reputation," he repeated. "You think turning away good people makes this place better?" The salesman scoffed. "He can't afford anything here." Clint smirked, "And you can tell that just by looking at him." The salesman smirked back. "I've been in this business a long time. People like him don't come here to buy. They come to dream." Clint's jaw tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a credit card. He held it up. "How about this? He picks whatever he wants. And I'll pay for it." The salesman's smug smile vanished. The poor man's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't accept this," he stammered. Clint tilted his head. "Why not?" The man looked around nervously. "Because I don't deserve it." Clint's gaze softened. He placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "Son, a man's worth isn't measured by his wallet. It's measured by his heart." The salesman rolled his eyes. "Fine," he muttered. "Pick something." But Clint wasn't done yet. He turned to the other customers. "How many of you walked in here today without being judged?" he asked. People shifted uncomfortably. Clint continued, his voice steady. "Now imagine if you were treated like you didn't belong. Just because of how you looked." A young woman near the counter bit her lip. A man in a suit lowered his gaze. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the store felt different. Clint turned back to the salesman. "You think money is what makes a man valuable?" he asked. "Let me tell you something, you just lost something more valuable than any suit in this store." The salesman frowned. "And what's that?" Clint's expression hardened. "Respect." The poor man finally picked a suit, his hands shaking. The cashier hesitated before ringing it up, unsure if this was really happening. Clint tapped his card. "Transaction approved." The salesman's face was red with embarrassment. He watched as Clint helped the man put on the suit jacket. "You look good," Clint said with a small nod. The man looked at himself in the mirror, his eyes filled with emotion. I don't know how to thank you." Clint smirked. "You don't owe me anything. Just remember this moment. And when you can, do the same for someone else." The salesman clenched his fists. He knew he had lost more than just a sale. He had lost his dignity. But then, Clint did something no one expected. He walked over to the salesman, reached into his pocket, and handed him a $1 bill. The salesman frowned. What's this for? Clint smirked. A tip. Next time, use your words to lift someone up instead of tearing them down. The salesman's mouth fell open. The store was silent. As Clint turned to leave, the other customers looked at each other, then, one by one, they started applauding. The poor man, now standing tall in his new suit, wiped his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Clint nodded at him one last time before stepping out into the street. The salesman watched as customers walked out, their gazes cold. In just a few minutes, he had lost the trust of everyone in that store, and Clint. He simply walked away, his job done. If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss another powerful story like this.